Hello, I'm Dr. Jamel Sandage from NICES Corporation, and today I'd like to talk to you about building biosanitation revenue in commercial and residential accounts. So first I'd like to talk to you about microbial products and biosanitation and how they kind of work together. And what is biosanitation, in fact? So number one thing you think of is biocleaners and biosanitation products, but these contain beneficial microbes that penetrate deep into cracks and crevices to break down organic debris and buildup. They continue to work for a long period after the product has been applied, which also helps to protect against future sanitation issues. It also eliminates biofilm, which is a primary contributor to the spread of disease and the source of most small fly problems that you see in commercial and even in residential accounts. The products that you'll use with biosanitation are known by many different names. You may hear probiotic cleaners, you may hear biosanitation products, you might hear biocleaners, biocides, many of these different names. They all have a very similar mode of action and a very similar method in which they are applied and used in different circumstances. Most of these products are specialized for certain purposes, so I'll talk a little bit later about this, but you'll see things like proteases and cellulases that are more specific to certain areas of application, such as sewage treatment plants or maybe commercial kitchens versus other things, but I'll help you discern between those. But one of the biggest things I want to point out about biosanitation is that these are cleaners that we're dealing with. They're not pesticides at all. So we want to always keep these two things separated and understand that cleaning is an effective way or cleaning and biosanitation is an effective way to get rid of the materials that are building up in cracks and crevices and causing problems. So why choose biosanitation in the first part? Biosanitation is a more natural process. It's a natural microbial and antimicrobial ingredients to clean, reduce buildup, and actively break down what's called fog, so fats, oils, and grease, as well as other things like carbohydrates and proteins. So it's more environmentally responsible than your traditional chemical cleaners. It helps reduce risk to employees because, again, you're not dealing with those harsh chemicals or harsh concentrates that someone has to dilute wearing massive amounts of PPE in some terms. So you have reduced the long-term cost of sanitation because these products do not need to be applied every day or even as often as traditional products. Chemical cleaners only provide a short-term effective solution. So these chemical cleaners, they clean the surface, and then those chemical cleaners are degraded, they're gone, or they're washed away. Whereas with biosanitation, the spores stay there, and the spores are continuously creating new colonies, and once those colonies get going, they're creating more and more colonies to do the effective work. So those biosanitation cleaners stay around a lot longer than your traditional chemical cleaners. They also remove organic debris, which helps control odor at the source. So you're getting rid of the debris and you're getting rid of the thing that actually causes the odor in the first place. So one of the key things to understand with biosanitation is understanding what this thing is called biofilm. So biofilm is a thicky glue-like substance formed by bacteria cells, or formed by the breakdown of bacterial cells, as well as some protective coatings of bacterial cells as well. And they harbor that bacteria, but it also keeps that bacteria safe. So it's a layer of slime that forms over the bacteria to keep the bacteria safe as a kind of a defense mechanism. So it mostly forms on wet environments, so we would be looking at things like inside of pipes, but also commercial kitchens because they stay wet continuously with all of the food preparation, dishwashing, and other things that go on in the background. So some examples of things like a biofilm or dental plaque. So if you've ever woken up in the morning and you felt that kind of slimy feeling on your teeth, that's a sort of a biofilm. If you don't brush your teeth at all, that biofilm builds up pretty thick, and that would be a very good example of that, as well as something like rocks in a stream. So if you're walking along a fresh stream, you step in, you slip on a rock, that was a layer of biofilm on top of that rock that allowed you to slip. So when you think about what a biosanitation product is going to do, is it's going to help break down that biofilm and reduce the organic matter so that that pipe stays clean and runs clean all the time. So any surface that this is being applied to, it's going to do that same thing. It's going to break down the carbohydrates, break down the proteins, break down the biofilm, so that you have a nice clean surface. So now, one thing I want you to think about is if you've worked in commercial kitchens, or if you haven't worked in commercial kitchens, but you've been in a commercial kitchen, I want you to think about the drain backups and some of the things that you see on a daily basis. And here you'll see a picture of just how disgusting some of these drains can be. I'll have more of those pictures later, but one thing you really see is just how much organic material can build up in, around, down the drains that has to be removed. And biosanitation is the perfect way to help alleviate these problems, as well as prevent those problems from occurring anyway. The first step in this process is to really remove as much solid material, physical material as possible. And so that is done so that the microbes have a fighting chance. You know, we really can't expect microbes to eat through 5 years worth of some, non-cleaning, or 5 years of things that have built up in a drain. So that will allow, that initial cleaning allows the enzymes and the microbes to get to the surface they need to be at and give them a chance to start working right away. So if you notice also in these pictures, you'll see a lot of that buildup on the tile and the grout in these same pictures. So when you're doing your biosanitation, just think about it's not just the drain. There are a lot of other places that need this same sort of a process. So how do biosanitation products work? Once you apply the biosanitation product, whether it's a foam, a gel, or a liquid, it releases the spores. These spores are dormant and tough versions of active cells, so they're very, very tough outer coatings that can survive unfavorable conditions. So they can survive things like excessive heat, excessive cold, and even some chemical treatments and things of that sort. Each spore contains what's known as one CFU, or one colony forming unit. So the higher the initial spore count, the better the product, up to a certain point. Now, you can get extremely excessive and have 2.7 quintillion colony forming units, but that's not going to be more effective than something that has 255 billion CFUs. So up to a certain point, that the CFUs actually are very important. So most products contain anywhere from about 10 to 600 billion CFUs, and that is plenty to get the job done. So for most surfaces, you will not actually need anything as high as 600 billion CFUs, but the higher the spore count, the better. Or the higher the CFU or the spore count, the better. Most of these products, or just about every single product on the market, contains several different strains of microbes that specialize in a particular enzyme pathway. So whether it is meant for breaking down fat, or breaking down proteins, or breaking down urine, cellulose. So each one of these microbes may have a particular enzyme pathway that is important. So that's why a lot of these products have a blend of 3 or 4 or 7 different microbes. Once those spores, or those colony forming units, contact favorable conditions, they germinate and produce active colonies. So these active colonies are what's going to be reducing your, once they break that dormant phase and they become active, that's what starts the entire process. Those active colonies then start to produce enzymes. Those enzymes is what we call extracellular enzymes because they're manufactured inside the cells, and they go outside of the cells to actually have their function. So these enzymes are proteins, not living organisms. So a lot of times you'll see enzymatic products, and the difference between the two I'll go over specifically, but enzymes are proteins. The living organism is what produces those enzymes. So these enzymes degrade products, and they're used by the cell to produce energy. So this results, this energy and this degrading or eating of the carbohydrates and proteins and fats produces more and more cells, which produces more and more enzymes. Each one of these enzymes is used once to a few times. So that means when you buy an enzyme-based product, it has a limited shelf life or a limited time once it leaves the bottle as well. So these cells continue to reproduce as long as conditions stay favorable. So once the conditions are not favorable, let's say that this environment completely dries up. When we know in commercial kitchens that's probably never going to happen. But let's say that it dries up and that it is a completely dry surface. Now these cells will actually produce spores themselves, go back into the spore phase, and rest in that spore phase until the correct conditions come back again. So if the spores are successfully produced, they will germinate and continue the process as well. This is why a lot of times follow-up treatments are necessary. The follow-up treatments aren't necessary because the spores are gone. In some cases where they may get washed down a drain or washed off a surface, that's a good reason for a follow-up treatment. But also a follow-up treatment is used to spike the number of spores that are found on surfaces. So increasing the number of active colonies present. So I spoke about this earlier, but what exactly is the difference between an enzyme concentrate product and a microbial product or a beneficial microbial product? Enzyme concentrates contain a specific quantity of enzymes to break down complex molecules into smaller pieces. They're used as single-use cleaners, useful for short-term action, maintenance, stain removal, and odor control. These enzymes, as I said earlier, have a finite life once they're out of the bottle. And if you read the side of the bottle, a lot of them will actually say will last up to 60 hours or will last up to 80 hours. So after that 80 hours, that enzyme product is gone. But when you have a microbial product or the beneficial microbes that are actually producing the enzymes, those products will last much, much longer. So they contain the very microbes that create the enzymes found in those enzymatic formulations. They're just extracted from the microbes and placed into the enzyme product. So instead of the finite number of enzymes, you now have an endless supply. And as an example, what I always say is someone gives you an ear of corn. Instead of eating that ear of corn, you save that ear of corn, you dry it out, you plant an entire field of corn, and now you have an entire field of corn instead of just one single ear of corn. And that's how it works. Instead of having just a few enzymes, now you have the beneficial microbes that are producing hundreds and thousands of enzymes to perform the work. So a few common practices that limit the efficacy and efficiency of biosanitation there are a few things that are very common in commercial facilities. In particular, power washing and spraying down walls and surfaces leads to food particles just being blasted underneath the walls, deep into cracks and crevices, under tiles, behind equipment, and even a lot of times I've seen it on the ceilings of the facility, where we probably rarely ever think about looking for the source of a small fly infestation. So bleach is another one. Bleach is pretty common and found in just about every commercial facility. Bleach kills microbes. And will it kill any microbe? Yes. So it will kill beneficial microbes as well as, negative microbes. So we try to to limit the use of bleach and quaternary cleaners and things like that after the microbial products have been applied. So the biggest other thing down there is actually just antimicrobial products. In addition, so things like just antimicrobial soap and washing that down the drains will also kind of kill off the beneficial bacteria. So if you remember a few slides ago, I talked about coming in and spiking the number of colony forming units with each follow-up that you perform at a restaurant or other facility or residential area. That's really what I'm talking about. It's making sure that that number stays at an active level so that you can have the maximum amount of cleaning power at any given time. Now let's talk about this because it's going to happen. So how can biosanitation, disinfecting, and sanitizing work together? A lot of facilities are not going to go away from using a sanitizer or a disinfectant. So I want to talk briefly about being able to use these together so that you can better communicate with the managers and the cleaners at the facility. Sanitizers, the good thing is that sanitizers only last a short period of time and they have little to no residual most of the time. So the sequence is important. If you are going to go into a facility on the weekend and do a biosanitation service, it's okay if they, on Friday afternoon or Friday morning, whenever they do it, it's okay if they use sanitizers or disinfectants, but just make sure that the biosanitation microbes have a long enough period in between there to do its cleaning. It's better if you don't use them at all, and once these drains once the drains and other areas get clean and the organic material has been reduced, and then some of those powerful degreasers and other types of cleaners that can kill off the beneficial microbes won't be necessary. So one of the things I like to say is don't sanitize the filth. So a lot of commercial facilities will just, they'll use disinfectants down the drains, but what they're actually doing is they're just sanitizing filth. If you don't ever clean the drain, physically clean it with a brush, or if you don't use biosanitation products to assist with that cleaning, then you're really just sanitizing the filth. So dirt, grease, and grime protect bacteria from disinfection. So I talked about that layer of biofilm. You can also just simply have a layer of dirt on top of the bacteria that protects bacteria from being killed by disinfection or a sanitation service. Now, how do we enhance the efficacy of those microbial products? Number one, the most important thing that you can ever do for microbes is have a high moisture content. So this is why they're very beneficial in drains and especially commercial kitchens where they stay relatively wet all the time. So the cells must be moist or wet to germinate and to reproduce. So I want to say that again, the microbes must be wet. The surfaces need to be moist or wet for them to grow and for the spores, for those colony forming units, to actually form active colonies. So this really means that if you're spraying a surface and if that surface is going to be dry later on, then it's not a surface that you would want or expect a lot of action out of the microbes unless you continuously mist that surface or wet that surface. The second most important thing there is temperature. Microbes flourish at higher temperatures, so slightly warmer temperatures. And this is why with a lot of products you will see run warm water down the drains or down the sinks, or use, don't apply it when it's very cold. And that's because the more acute the temperature, so the slightly warmer temperature, the faster the microbes will go, and the faster they'll produce enzymes, and the faster they'll break down that fog, that fats, oils, and grease. The next thing here is reducing water flow. This is important because the enzymes, the microbes and the enzymes they produce require time. So if you're using the products down the drain and 5 minutes later somebody comes and dumps a 5-gallon bucket of water, or whatever else they're dumping out that day down the drain, it is of course going to wash down the microbial spores. So you want to reduce the water flow and reduce flushing the drains and the pipes for as long as possible. And that brings up number 4, which is time. The most important thing, and besides moisture, is giving the microbes enough time to do their job. Now, how long will this take? It really depends on the situation, and I'll touch on that briefly later. But number 5 on here is also steam. So switching from using disinfectants and using sanitizers to steam cleaning, which also kills bacteria and all of the nasty things that we're trying to clean in the first place. Switching to that steam cleaning will actually help greatly with the biosanitation protocols. So let's review a couple of products and formulations, because there are a ton of these products on the market, and they come in many, many different forms, and which form is better for your individual purpose. First of all, they come in ready to use. Ready to use is probably the one you see the most often. It's ready to use in a spray bottle or in a drain cleaner. You pour it right down the drain. The next thing you'll see a lot is aerosols or aerosol foams. So we have products such as Bacazap, Foam Fresh, and those are products that are one is an aerosol, basically in a trigger sprayer. The other is an aerosol foam. And so that will coat surfaces, and the foams work to keep surfaces a little more moist than they would if you are just spraying something out of a trigger sprayer and then the environment dries up. The next one down there is concentrates. So you don't see a lot of concentrates, but when you do see the concentrates, they'll have a 4 ounces per gallon rate or a 6 ounces per gallon rate to equal a certain number of colony forming units. So you'll have to pay attention to the individual rates of the products. So when you're comparing product to product, you look at not only how many ounces are in the product, but also look at the dilution rate, and also look at the number of colony forming units per ounce of product that's being produced. So you'll see a lot of things that are combination cleaners and foam, or they're semi-concentrates, so they're slightly concentrated. You can dilute them or you can use them straight, but they also have a physical cleaning action. So they contain some light cleaners where if you want to clean a surface, you can scrub a surface and it'll clean that surface and leave the spores behind, so that the spores will produce the colonies that produce the enzymes. You have a few products that are different, like drain gels and slow release drain pucks or drain bricks, and you also have wall mounted dosing units. So many of these cleaners are ready to use, but also some of them have many capabilities. So some will have a cleaner that also is slightly concentrated, that also has a foaming capability. So you'll see combination products like that. But the most important things to look for, if it's a concentrate, or how many colony forming units that are present in that particular product. The next thing I would like to talk about is foam versus liquid versus gel, because there's always a big debate of what products should you use. So product delivery, penetration, contact, and longevity are the different things to kind of think about when you're choosing a product. Foam, it's a product delivery system. So it's one of the ones that seems to work extremely well because it does leave a sort of a wet coating on the surface for a short period of time. So this is mostly useful. We have dry foams and wet foams. Dry foams are mostly useful in pre-existing moist environments. So if it's already moist there and it's going to stay moist, a dry foam is better. And when we talk about dry versus wet foam, one just contains a little bit more foaming agent and a little more water per ounce of foam that's produced. So if you think about a dry foam, a shaving cream would be a dry foam. It goes on, but it doesn't really make your face wet. And a wet foam would be a little bit more different. If you're taking a shower and you use a body wash, that would be more of a wet foam. So that wet foam gets on your arm or your shoulders, and it slowly falls down, falls off your body as you're showering. The next thing is liquid or foaming liquid. So this is a very versatile product range because you can use it to spray directly on surfaces, or you can put it inside of a foaming unit or a foaming sprayer and you can spray it as a foam. The next thing are gels. Gels are really common in consumer markets. They're a very thick natured product that runs down the surface very slowly and disperses the colonies over time. So when is foam most beneficial? So anytime there is a different surface, whether we have pipes, anywhere where gravity is involved, anywhere there's a void, that is a time when foam would be most beneficial to increase the contact time that those microbes will have on that surface. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the tools and equipment. So if you're going to start a biosanitation branch of your business or start adding on biosanitation services, one of the things that's very nice about it is you don't need a lot of expensive equipment. You can get by with a few things in order to increase your revenue tenfold. So aerosols and foaming aerosols are available everywhere, and they're good for quick jobs, they're good for follow-ups, and they're also good for leaving if you want to use that product and then leave it behind for the customer or have that customer purchase it from you. Quart spray bottles or trigger spray foam bottles, you can find those very cheaply as well. Just a regular old quart spray bottle that you label with your particular product. And like I mentioned earlier, most of these products come in a quart spray bottle anyway. Trigger spray foamer, you can find those a lot of different places. Instead of producing a liquid when you pull the trigger, it actually produces a kind of a wet foam that comes out. You also have hand foamers. You have ones as small as a quart or as large as a gallon, and those would be small foamers about this size that have a pump on them. One of the things it's useful for small jobs, but if you're going to be getting into this for a bigger time or bigger services or larger facilities, then a hand foamer will just not do it. You really need a lot of head space inside of your foamer, because if you're foaming, you're using that air. The air is mixing with liquid. So if you have a 1 gallon sprayer, you really want to have half a gallon of air and half a gallon of liquid so that the two mix as they're coming out, depending on the foamer. Some foam at the handle, some foam in the tank, some foam other places. So just be aware of that. So you want to get, if you're thinking about a 1 gallon foamer, go ahead and get a 2 gallon foamer, because you're going to have half the amount of product that you plan to in that container. Ideally, if you're going to do this a lot, if you're going to get into this even in commercial or residential settings, you're going to want to have a foamer, a handheld, a 1 to 2 gallon foamer that's a hand pump foamer, or either an electric or battery powered foamer. Other tools that you may use if you're getting into larger facilities, I've been at stadiums where they're treating all of the dumpsters on site, and for that you're going to need something larger. So there are things like the foaming guns and hose-in foaming guns that you would use to wash your car. Those can also be used to produce a wet foam with biosanitation products. You also have power washer spray foamers as well. So there are a number of different things on the market for using biosanitation in larger type of a setting. So whether you're looking at a huge commercial facility, a stadium, if you're treating the ground underneath the seats at a stadium where all the sticky, messy liquid always falls, you would need something pretty big. Misters and foggers, those are great for large areas, but you really want to get a mister or fogger that leaves a heavy, wet mist. Because again, moisture is very, very key to biosanitation. So as soon as that moisture is gone, those biosanitation, those microbes that are doing the biosanitation will not be very effective. Other tools you're going to need if you're going to get into this business and increase your revenue, you're going to need a drain brush. So there are a number of drain brushes on the market for cleaning, cleaning commercial drains, as well as cleaning things like cleaning toilets and cleaning individual, sinks within a residential setting. So you will need those because it is very, very beneficial for you to clean the surfaces first. Establish a flow, get the water moving. There are also things like pressure washer drain jet kits. Now these are actually pretty interesting. They're very cost effective and they clean very thoroughly. So if you're going to get really serious about this, then you can go ahead and buy some professional drain cleaning equipment, and that'll really, really get you into the ball game, especially when you're dealing with larger commercial facilities and when you're talking about your time. Your time is the most important thing, and using biosanitation products in general will save you time, but also using, the more professional, the more effective equipment you have, the quicker you can get in and out and, service your customers. So let's think about targets for you. Let's think about profit targets. What kind of a business do you want to go after when you're thinking about getting into or expanding your commercial and biosanitation services? Most of the time we think about things like commercial kitchens. It's the obvious one. We think about fast food restaurants, but one of the things we don't think about is fine dining. To seeing flies in a fast food restaurant is a little different from seeing drain flies at a fine dining restaurant. So it's one of those things where you can choose your target, and choosing your target in this case would include looking at the differences in how you want to set your business up. Do you want to go this route or that route? And it's important to make that decision early on. A few other places that you may not think about when you're thinking about creating a biosanitation program are coffee shops. Coffee shops, breweries, bars, smoothie shops, anywhere that they're going to have, rotating products and raw materials that could bring in either different sorts of pests or either different sorts of organic matter that can build up inside the facility. So coffee granules that sit around and they fall everywhere down in cracks and crevices, as well as most of them sell pastries and things like that. So you want to think about those sorts of facilities. Smoothies, of course, smoothie bars, they have a lot of fruit that's discarded, a lot of peels and papers and things that have the nice scents that are very attractive, especially in breweries as well. The same sorts of things, the organic materials are there that build up over time that cause issues. So a few more that you may not think about are nursing homes. Now, When I had a business, one of my fortes was nursing homes because I figured out that they have a lot of small fly problems. In kitchens, so they have filth flies, they have drain flies in different areas. The drains go dry a lot of times so that you have an open sewer system and flies come up through the sewer system sometimes. So they're commonly plagued by forage flies. Grocery stores, they're target-rich environments because they have several different areas in them where biosanitation may be important. They may have a commercial kitchen, they may have a food prep area, they may have a produce prep area, and they have produce out on the shelves as well. So many different areas where you could use biosanitation products. And really, athletic stadiums and arenas I've talked about, but really it's anywhere frequent food service and people come together. So anywhere there is food and anywhere there are a lot of people, there to spill things and not clean sometimes. So it doesn't necessarily require what we think of as food, but it's just organic debris. So we don't think of coffee grounds as food, but that is enough food for a forage fly to grow in. So those are the kinds of things you want to look for and target as well. A couple other places, daycares. So in daycares you have lots of spills, you have lots of little potties sitting around, you have stains, you have smells, you have they also sometimes have a semi-professional commercial kitchen. That goes as well as, for churches and gyms and schools and even homeless shelters. So I did some work when I did biosanitation. I did some work for homeless shelters, and I took out all the mattresses and I did a biosanitation treatment to all the mattresses. And we wrapped all those mattresses in plastic bags to keep them moist for a certain length of time, and that helped the microbes break down the organic materials that built up on the mattresses. Residential areas. Let's talk about your profit targets in residential because it's a little bit more difficult to think about the obvious things that may go wrong in a house. The first one is slow running drains. If you're ever doing a service and you hear someone say, wow, my sinks really run slow, that's a perfect opportunity for biosanitation because oftentimes you've built up a thick layer of biofilm or either just a thick layer of grease and grime in the pipes or in the drain system, and that leads to slow running drains. So you can offer a drain sanitation service, and that's sanitizing garbage disposals and all the drains in the house. If they have garbage bins or dumpsters, especially recycling containers. Recycling containers often contain those little bits of food and a little bit of juice or soda, or those things that coat the bottom and create that sticky, nasty, circumstance that biosanitation is perfect for. Garbage disposals, dishwashers, homes with septic tanks, washing machines and washing machine hoses are generally a real problem. If you're looking for a forage fly infestation in a residential home and you just can't find it, sometimes you go to the washing machine and you lift that hose out of the drain, you'll see how disgusting that drain is, number one, because of all the organic material that comes from the clothes being washed, but a lot of times that'll be a source of flies for that house. The other thing on this list is dead animal removal and scent elimination. So how many times have you been called for a dead rodent or something died under the house? So a lot of times possums, they get hit by a car in the street, they go underneath someone's house and they die under the house. You're called to remove that. What do you do to get rid of the smell? Biosanitation is the answer to that puzzle. Next, I would really like to tell you about selling your service. If you're interested in this angle, this biosanitation business, you need to look into budgets, safety, and success. Pest control budgets, as we all know who have been in this business for any length of time, are always less than cleaning budgets. But in this case, it is actually beneficial because you can tap into that cleaning budget that they have in order to offer your services as a biosanitation cleaning service, because that's really what you're doing. You're offering a biosanitation cleaning service. Most commercial facilities do their own cleaning. Some may hire outside services every once in a while, but for the most part, they do their own cleaning, or at least they say they do their own cleaning. There's people clean, so they clean the surfaces, everything looks good. But then there's insect clean. That's getting underneath the tables. That's getting on the legs and feet of the equipment. That's pulling out refrigerators, pulling out equipment, going behind there, cleaning out. So you know that that's not done very often, and those are things that you could either offer or you can suggest. And if you're going to start a serious biosanitation cleaning service, those are things you may want to think about offering as part of that service. Biosanitation is also a method of advanced IPM. So you're actually trying to prevent buildup from occurring and reducing organic material, fats, oils, and grease also before they occur. Other things that you can use to sell your service is that, these greasy floors in restaurants, and we've all been in a restaurant and had a slip because of the greasiness of the floor. Just think about working there all the time. So biosanitation processes, these microbes break down the fats, oils, and grease that build up on floors as well. So you're reducing slip and fall accidents. You're reducing and removing harmful bacteria and by keeping the drains running freely. If there's nothing for them to cling onto, such as that layer of biofilm, or nothing to protect it, then they'll wash straight down the drains. You reduce the buildup in grease traps, and every commercial facility is going to have problems with the grease traps from time to time because they are just a place where it accumulates fats, oils, and grease. And again, biosanitation is specialized at breaking down those materials. You can also reduce offensive smells in bathrooms. If you're in a high-class, fine dining restaurant and you go into the bathroom and it smells horrible, one of the things that could be happening is that it's either the drains or either the buildup of organic material on the walls and floors of that facility. So biosanitation is beneficial for their business, for their patrons, for their employees, and for health and safety. Now, what are the expectations? This is what I get asked more than anything else. What can I expect? How long is it going to take? When will I see results? Well, there is really no replacement for cleaning, physical cleaning. But biosanitation is a very beneficial tool, but it's not a miracle solution. You still need to clean. Biosanitation products can help to loosen, the years and years of organic material in extreme situations. So if you have grease that's been splattering on a wall for 17 years, biosanitation products can be applied to that wall to help loosen up the grease, break down the grease, and then it can be cleaned off. From that point, you can do biosanitation services on that wall to prevent the future buildup. So some surfaces just need to be cleaned. They need to be scraped. They need to be brushed prior to the application of biosanitation products. Performing maintenance is another big thing that can help or hinder the efforts of the microbes. So performing things like fixing missing grout, replacing cracked tiles, putting trim back on, patching holes in the walls, fixing leaky pipes. Those are all things that can help with the process and help so that the microbes really have a fighting chance to do their job. So I talked about biosanitation and how it's a part of advanced IPM. So it does things like reduce potential breeding grounds, reduce conducive conditions, and have corrective measures for small flies, ants, cockroaches, other pests like that that you may see in facilities. Biosanitation and pesticide applications can work together. So a lot of times you'll see IGRs can be added to some biosanitation products. You have some borate products that can be used in conjunction with biosanitation products, larvicides, and even some adulticides that can be used either mixed with the biosanitation products or used in conjunction with the biosanitation products. And one thing to be aware of is that many of your botanical formulations that we're kind of moving in that direction somewhat in some commercial and residential facilities. A lot of those have antimicrobial activities, such as things like thymol from thyme oil is used as an antimicrobial. You'll even see some disinfectants on the market that contain those products. So that's something to think about when moving forward as well. One more thing to think about. Have you ever heard of a Fatberg? Fatberg, just like an iceberg, it is a giant mass of fats, grease, and other solids that build up in sewer systems. Now you might ask, how does it get there? Well, the extensive use of degreasers, it breaks down the grease on the surface. It may break down the grease around the drain and in the drain, but what often happens with these degreasers is it takes the problem from here, sends it down the drain into the sewer system where it all gets together once again, and that fat accumulates into these massive structures that cities and municipalities are having huge problems with getting out of the sewer systems and correcting those problems. So the extensive use of degreasers is a problem in commercial and residential facilities. Biosanitation products are different because they are not just loosening the grease and sending it down the drain. They're actually consuming the fats, oils, grease, carbohydrates, and other things. And so what you have left over is just byproducts, which include water. So you don't have that same scenario of sending one problem from here to create another problem in the sewer system. So I hope that this presentation has given you some good information and a basis for understanding how microbial products work, how biosanitation works, and how you can increase your revenue by adding biosanitation services to your repertoire. It's easy to get started. You can get started with just a few products and just a very minimal equipment just to get you started. As that business starts rolling in, you can get more advanced, but there are a number of products on the market such as Bacazap, such as Foam Fresh, that will benefit you right away. You can use them in a trigger sprayer, you can use them in an aerosol can, but it'll get the ball rolling. And once you start seeing what these products can do in both commercial and residential facilities, you'll want to increase your use of these products every day. And so thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at Nices Corporation.